Recently I've been spending time again with a text from Dogen. It's his last, called The 8 Awakenings of Great Beings. And some of you have heard me talk about it before. It's one of my all-time favorites. I don't know if it's because it's feeling like spring or what, but my mind starts moving toward the things that inspire me, I guess. And this is one. So I thought I would return to this text. It's been a few years since we talked about it as a community, and tonight, as a kind of lead-in to that, I wanted to bring up not the basic idea, but one of the basic frameworks we can use for understanding this text. Some of you have heard me talk about. So in Japanese, it's Hachi Dainin Gaku. Hachi means 8, so that's simple. And the Gaku is the awakenings. But the Dainin is interesting because the Chinese characters are big and person. And this is usually translated as great beings, as bodhisattvas. I've heard it different ways. Suggesting that this text is about people who are beyond normal, I guess. But what's kind of inescapable if you read Chinese characters is that this same pairing of big and person is also just the word for adult. So anyone at first read would read the title of this text as The 8 Awakenings of Grown-ups. I find it impossible to read this text without thinking about that, without carrying that lens, without holding it to that idea of basic maturity. And as I said, we'll get to the 8. Not today, though. Because today I want to talk about this idea of being an adult. And whether it fits on a spectrum of childhood to adulthood, maybe to Buddhahood, or maybe bodhisattvahood. And maybe I should say before I even start that maybe the hood isn't the right word, There's so many things that are wonderful, for example, about being a child. Enviable things that when I watch my children, I think, I wish I could recapture that. I wish I could taste that curiosity again, that excitement again, that particular kind of joy again. Maybe there's another way. Maybe what we really mean is childishness and adultness and bodhisattvaness. But I'll say childhood, adulthood, and Buddhahood. All of this hinges on the idea of being an adult. But we can start, again, without knowing the 8 awakenings, without looking into that definition. We can look to our own definition, to our own understanding in our lives of what it means to be at these stages. What does it mean to be a child? To see the world through a child's eyes. In some ways it's beautiful. And the imagination can be so vast. But the world itself for a child is pretty small. There's so many rules. There's so many unknowns. Not just about what's out there, but about what's here. Much of the experience of being a child because there isn't much we can control, is trying to control things that are very close to us. And so we say, I don't like broccoli. I don't want to eat broccoli. It's not my thing. We rail against the idea of restriction. What do you mean I have to be home by 9? That's ridiculous. We are invested, because we don't have much, in what is ours and what is not ours and what is fair. So that if there are 6 candies and 2 kids, it has to be 3 and 3. And if there are 7 candies and 2 kids, there's a crisis. And I want to be clear, in this framework, through this lens, childhood is not restricted to biological age. We live in an age, for example, we live in a culture, for example, where there is a premium placed on liberty. And liberty being defined as no one ever telling me that I cannot do what I want to do right now. If that is your guiding principle, you're a child. It doesn't matter how old you are. Because as we move into this idea of being an adult, we start to let go a little bit of this idea of what has to be mine, of what is fair. I hear people a little younger than me, they like to joke sometimes about adulting as a verb and the difficulties of adulting. And adulting, when they talk about it, is in many ways passive. It's an acceptance of the responsibilities of the world, the mundane responsibilities of the world. Adulting means you have to take out the garbage, finally. It means you have to think about things like taxes. You have to pay the rent. You have to have a job. All of these things outwardly look like what it means to be an adult. And the ability to accept that today I have to do this, even if I don't want to do this, I think is part of being an adult. Not just in my own reality, but also in the way that Dogen would describe it. But I also want to offer that being an adult is not simply passive. That there's a kind of threshold that we cross over. For some people it happens when they have children. For some people when they get a pet. For some people when they find a cause. For some people when they find a partner. Where they are genuinely able to place someone else's needs above their own. Not just in one moment, not just in one generous moment of saying, you can have 4 candies and I'll have 3, but as a basic stance in the world. To say, I will have less so that you can have what you need. Because you matter to me. Because I recognize your value. And your value gives value to my actions. And again, some people never cross that threshold. Never truly. But many do. There's a degree to which we can count on this, that something happens, something breaks or bends that helps us step across to this other place where I am not the most important thing, where justice for me alone is not the most important thing, or my comfort is not the most important thing. Because now I've found something else that is the most important thing. And then we might say that beyond that there's something like Buddhahood or Bodhisattvahood. And if it's all on a continuum, then it's just a greater stage of letting go. If adulthood is looking into my child's eyes and saying, "You're the most important thing," but maybe still having a protective stance. I've expanded now, but I have only expanded to you. Bodhisattvahood would be looking into the eyes of anyone and taking that stance. Not in a way that creates a bubble, but in a way that dissolves all of them. And so we progress in this way through acts of letting go and letting in. We let go of what is literally physically mine. Again, we let go to an extent of what's fair in relationship to me. And as we do that, even if we aren't on a spiritual path per se, even if we've never heard it described in this way, we are in fact letting go of a story about who I am. That I am this and that I deserve this. That I need to be protected in this way. That I am at risk. We release our grasp on that story. We release that grasp on I, on me, and make room for others. Selectively at first, and then more. And it's not magical, it's not complicated. You know, if you fall in love with one cat, if you have a cat in your life who has found its way in, all cats are now at least a little bit in. When you love someone, really, without reservation, without conditions, that's what makes it possible for you to see others in that same way. And so sometimes when you don't expect it at all, when nothing special is happening at all. You're able to see someone, for example, who looks like that person. And before you even know it, before you even think of it, you extend that love. And then maybe you pull it back. Maybe you say, oh no. But you've already shown yourself by accident that you know how. And so we can also think about this spectrum from childhood to adulthood to bodhisattvahood, if we want to, in terms of love. Our capacity to love. Our willingness to love. And our ability to not put boundaries on what love is or where it goes. I think about this a lot in this frame in particular, partly because I love this text so much, but because it's not static. So I can have a moment in which I know that I am taking the stance of an adult, and then the next moment I can encounter some injustice, something that comes from nowhere, and I can revert. And for a moment, or maybe longer, now I'm a child, focused only on what's mine. And in the same way, I can have that surprise. That surprise that makes everything bigger for a minute. That moment where my boundaries are soft and I love people on the street for no reason. I love the people on the TV for no reason. The people in my imagination for no reason. Because I don't need a reason. And in that moment, I step into that other place. I taste it. And then I step back. For the next few weeks, I want to dive into this text, into these 8 awakenings of great beings. One more time. I shouldn't say one more time. If I live long enough, it will be many, many times. And look again at this idea of what it is to grow up. To reach some kind of maturity. Not in a supernatural way, not in a mystical way, but in an obvious, basic way that is accessible now. I think it's our central task. And it's hard. But we can do it. And I'll stop there.